It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Welcome to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I'm your host, Patrick Brown. Joining me as always is my line mate, Kyle Knopp. And, well, Devin is actually out in the Pacific Northwest with what we can only assume is scouting the Kraken. But in the meantime, I am pleased to introduce our newest Red Wings writer jumping into the fire with us today, Jeff Middleton. Jeff, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here and ready to talk some Red Wings hockey.
Oh, well, you came to the right place. That's for sure. So we're thrilled to have you on. Looking forward to get going. So let's dive right in. We have quite a bit of ground to cover today. So first, right out of the gate, let's talk about the alternate situation in Detroit, because as we all know, we talked a little bit about last week with Nielsen getting bought out. There is an A up for grabs. If you haven't checked out our weekly Grindline column that comes out on Mondays, go ahead, log on, check out the one from last week, because we talk about this very subject. Except, Jeff, I don't think you were in on that one. So we're going to put you right on the hot seat right out of the gate, and want to get your thoughts on the alternate captains this year. What do you think? Who are we looking at with Nielsen out? Who's going to get it?
So, yes, I was out this week, unfortunately, but I did manage to cast some votes. I had Tyler Bertuzzi as kind of my primary guy for the A, and then I had Sam Gagner, which seemed to be a fairly popular guy. Bertuzzi, I really like him. I wrote a big article on the top line for the Red Wings, and I think he could be an integral part of that. He brings a lot to the table, not only with his skill, but his tenacity around the net and his ability to win puck battles down low. And for me, he's just the guy that you have. You have Larkin, seems like a steady guy who can be a good leader. And then you have Bertuzzi, who brings the edge and really kind of spices up that leadership group. And with Gagner, I think he's a really solid kind of depth presence. He's really good defensively, and that's what I love about him. Is he may not be the flashiest guy, but he gets the job done in his own end. And he plays the puck really well. He plays his position really well. And that really is like Larkin. He's very steady. Especially, I think those defensive guys can be hard to come by. And if you have that guy as a leader, I think he could be really good for keeping the team on track.
I think both solid choices. It's hard to argue with them. The Wings have a lot of candidates, and I like hearing the different arguments, and both solid choices for sure. Kyle, your thoughts on who may don the A this upcoming season for the Wings?
The more I think about this question, Pat, the more it just gets more jumbled in my mind. I mean, there's so many great candidates that they could really lean on this year, which is something to say for this team. I really think Bertuzzi is going to end up getting one of the A's. I think, excuse me, Jeff just hit the nail on the head, and he is really one of those outspoken leaders that you really want, those vocal guys that are really going to stir the team up when they need to be stirred up, and you need one of those guys. For my number two, if we had re-signed Bobby Ryan, I think that would have been my go-to guy. I love his story. I love what he brings to the team. I think Sam Gagner is a very close prototype of that type of player that you want. So I think Gagner would be a good A. But the more I've been thinking about it, and the more I when we first wrote this article, I think it's going to go to one of our defensemen. My choice would probably be Letty. He's kind of been around those teams and has that experience. But then a couple of our readers brought up good points about DeKaiser maybe getting it as a loyalty thank you for his time with the club. This could be his last season with the Red Wings, and this could be a good way for him to go out at the top of his leadership role. And then also another reader brought up a great argument in Hronik being kind of that young guy that could step into that role and be there to lead the team into the future.
Sure. Yeah. All solid choices. And you're right. The comments, I think there's a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people who could be nominated, if you will.
Yes.
So my choices were Bertuzzi and Mark Stahl. actually. So Bertuzzi, again, not to pile on, but I do want to reference, and I wrote about this too. When we had Kevin Allen on the show a month or two ago, he said, and I quote, Tyler Bertuzzi is the Red Wings' courage.
Absolutely.
And truer words to me were never spoken, right? They're not going to mess with the Wings as much when Bertuzzi's sitting on the bench. Even if he's on the bench, they're not going to mess with them as much. And we always go back to when Larkin got hurt because of that cheap shot by Jamie Benn. Does he do that if Bertuzzi's playing in the game? Probably not. But even if he does, I guarantee you he doesn't score the overtime game winner that same game to be able to do that. He, at the minimum, ends up with a fighting major because Bertuzzi squares off with him or whatever it might be. As for Mark Stahl, I think he brings that veteran leadership. I think he's shown quite a bit to the team with how he's been able to perform when put in a less than ideal situation when you're kind of that age and you're brought into a rebuilding team the way he was. And he's handled it with class. And I think he has kind of displayed those qualities that you want to see. If Larkin's not in the lineup, he's a good guy who can stand up and help make sure that the team is being treated fairly and he can lead by example. And that's why I went with Mark Stahl. But again, totally see the Letty arguments. The DeKaiser argument, if Ken Holland were GM, I would, I'd probably think more so worth that loyalty card.
I agree. Not to cut you off there. I think that is definitely more of a Ken Holland thing, but it could serve that same role of having Yzerman just kind of tipping his cap to him and saying like, we know we're going to replace you in a year. How about you kind of bring one of our younger guys under your wing, whether it's Hronik or Sider, and kind of groom them to be that next A.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, there's no knock on DeKaiser. if DeKaiser wore the A, let me tell you, when he first came into the league and we were all excited about him, and he was rushed, he was definitely rushed and stepped up and plugged some holes that the Wings desperately needed to at the time. And he's been around ever since. So it would be a really good nod for sure. I don't think I'd have a problem with just about anybody wearing the A, to be honest, because I'm going to sound like Ken Holland here, but I like our team. I like our team. But all right, let's move on here because we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I want to talk about somebody who, if we have talked about him on the show before, it's very few and far between. And I feel like we need to give him some attention. And that's our good friend, Vladislav Namestnikov, Slava Kozlov's nephew, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of excitement around his signing last year. Thought that he would help bolster the offense a little bit. And I'm not sure how you guys feel. Personally, I was disappointed in how he played this year. There was a lot of talk about him being picked up by Seattle in the expansion draft. Obviously, that's not the direction they went by taking Cholowski, but still there was talk of that, but they didn't. So he's still here. Recapping last season, he played in 53 games. He recorded 17 points, 8 goals, and 9 assists. And an abysmal 39.1% on faceoffs. He could take a lesson or two from our friend Luke Glendening, right? And it's not like he took 10 faceoffs. He was 135 out of 345. So not what you really want to see in the dot. So that said, what do you see Namestnikov's role on the team being this year? Is he a second line forward? Where do you think he fits with this team? And Jeff, we're going to kick it over to you first.
All right. So as you said, I was a little bit disappointed with his season last year. His regular numbers, his box score numbers weren't great. His advanced numbers weren't great. He just kind of had a, whatever season. And it certainly didn't live up to the expectations that Red Wings Nation had for him. And the good thing is that after this upcoming season, you don't have to re-sign him. If he somehow fails all expectations, if Jeff Blashill puts him in the top 6 and he just screws up everything and everything goes downhill, you don't have to worry about it after this upcoming season. So that's a good thing. However, if he does play up to the expectations that he had or that were set for him, why not re-sign him? He's on a cheaper contract and you can always kind of test him out maybe for another year or two and see how that works out. You have a lot of options here if you're Steve Yzerman, and I think that he could definitely be somebody that they rely on for the top 6 if he hits that potential.
always a funny sentiment when you're saying the good news is they don't have to re-sign him. So I like how you went about that there. Kyle, your thoughts on Vlad and where he fits in with the team this season?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff brings up a lot of good points with him being on a 1-year kind of tryout basis and also a fairly cheap contract compared to a lot of other wingers in this position. I see him kind of starting off the year, maybe around that middle sixth, second, third line area and kind of feeling out. Hopefully he can have a rebound year. Yzerman had him down in Tampa Bay for quite a few years. He put up some pretty good stats and then he got moved around. He was in New York for 2 years or 2.5 seasons and went to Ottawa for most of the season before the COVID shutdown. And then went over to Colorado for like 9 games before playoffs and then ended up in Detroit. So, I mean, he's probably wants to find that stability of cracking the lineup on a daily basis and having that, I'm coming to the rink every day and I'm going to be playing on my line mentality. So if we can get him into that by putting him somewhere in the middle 6 to start the year and he really kind of kicks it into gear, then I think he'll be fine. In the meantime, if he doesn't, we have a lot of good young guys on that bottom 6 role that we're going to be moving around. We just talked about this a week or two ago. What's our fourth line going to look like? We have a ton of young players and some veterans that are already kind of vying for those positions. So I feel like he's going to be on a short leash if he doesn't really get off to a hot start.
Yep. All good points. I think that makes sense. Look, in my book, he's a role player this year. Was optimistic he would increase the scoring. That didn't happen by much, but in his defense, by anybody, it didn't really happen by a whole lot. The Red Wings struggled to score yet again. There's not like Namestnikov was surrounded by talent, but he also didn't kind of step up and start creating the opportunities that we had hoped that he would. So in my book, he's a role player. If he performs well, top 6 on the second line, maybe if he starts performing well. To me, he's a third liner this season. And to your point, Kyle, there's a lot of talent coming up. And they're going to have an opportunity to make an impression too. So it looks like you have something to add, Kyle.
Yeah, actually, another point I wanted to make was he and Adam Erne were kind of the same type of player playing the same type of role, and they went in different directions. Erne showed that this was new life and he had something to prove, where Namestnikov just kind of, I don't want to say coasted last year, but he didn't really seem like he was out there to prove it as much as Erne was. So if we have 2 of the exact same players, give me the Adam Erne over the Namestnikov any day.
I think that's a really, really good comparison, to be honest. And you're right. They do kind of give you the same vibe, and Erne cashed in. Cashed in.
Absolutely.
So good stuff. We're going to take a early break because the back half of this show, just like last week, we've got a lot of comments to get to and talk about. So let's take a quick time out here. Want to thank you for watching the show. Give us a like, subscribe to the Hockey Writers channel. There is so much good stuff on here. We've got Blackhawks banter, Sabres scoop, Chicks and Sticks, What's Cracking, the OG show, the Hockey Writers Live with Mark Shig. Follow us on Twitter, sign up for our Morning Skate newsletter, get the best hockey news delivered to you each and every morning. We're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, and frankly, if you want us to go on to GeoCities or Angel Fire or America Online or Prodigy, we'll log on and we'll get you your hockey news that way. So however it is you want to get your news, make sure you check it out. Like, comment. We love engaging with you in the comments section. It's been super active the last couple of weeks, and keep them coming because we're really digging it. So, all right, our bills are paid. We live to see another week. And let's get to those comments because we have a number of them to talk about this week. And let's start with Billy 1991, who floated an interesting idea about Yzerman maybe having something in mind by buying Nielsen out. In that same comment, if you will, Billy floated an idea that the Wings may be a playoff contender this year. Not necessarily, I didn't take it as a championship contender, but maybe fighting for that last spot in. So want to open that up for debate and get your thoughts on, do you think there's an ulterior motive by buying Nielsen out, number one. And number two, is this a team that can be in the playoff hunt? And we'll just say in the hunt as the season begins to wrap up this year. So, Jeff, let's start with you.
So, for me, I feel like there's never a move that Steve Yzerman makes without a plan. I mean, we've watched this guy over the last few years. He doesn't make a move without having something in the back of his mind, or at least it seems like he has something in the back of his mind anytime he does anything with roster players. One idea that I found kind of floated out there earlier in the offseason, even when all of this drama was going on, was Jack Eichel. I mean, he's a younger guy, and obviously
you're going there, Jeff.
There.
I am going there. Well, you are officially a Grindline member.
Yeah,
I like
it. I took Devin's spot, so I feel like I'm going with the Devin kind of take here.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah,
but like Jack Eichel, we all know that this drama stuff is happening with him, and everybody's read up on that stuff, and that it's kind of going down a dark road. But I feel like if everything does happen to work out, then why not try and at least pursue him, at least throw your hat into the ring and see what they're offering. Obviously the Sabres are going to want to haul. I mean, I would, if I was the Sabres GM, and I mean, you just saw Taylor Hall absolutely dominate for the Bruins, and all you got was like a decent roster player. And, it was just like, I would much rather keep Jack Eichel or get a ton of prospects and picks. I mean, that's pretty obvious to anyone who's been watching Jack Eichel over the last few years. But yeah, I mean, I think that it is kind of a Steve Yzerman type move to go after a guy like Jack Eichel. I mean, everybody knows what he can be at his best, and we've seen him on an awful team be one of the best players in the NHL.
Yep.
As for the playoff spot, I think with the right kind of balance, for me, goaltending is probably the biggest thing to help them out.
Sure.
With the addition of Nedeljkovic, and you have Greiss there, I think that could be a tandem that pushes you to the contention spot. However, you're in a very stacked Atlantic division, and that's probably their biggest foe. And I mean, obviously, they are probably one of their biggest enemies themselves with the scoring problems. But I'd say the biggest thing holding them back is the division that they're playing in.
Makes sense. We need to get our friends from Saber Scoop on here, and
yes, we do.
And Brandon Jordan, and see what they have to say about Eichel and their thoughts. So maybe a future show. Kyle, your thoughts on any ulterior motive for Nielsen, and what are the Wings looking like in the playoff hunt?
I appreciate this question and him posing it to us. I don't think we're there yet. I think the whole reasoning behind the Nielsen buyout, as we kind of discussed last week, was really to create the roster space for these younger guys, for these middle and bottom six players that are really starting to fight their way into the league. We're going to see Pearson's likely going to come up. Giovanni Smith needs more ice time. We have Mitchell Stevens now. We just talked about Sam Gagner being re-signed. Namestnikov needs to have that, consistency in the lineup. So I think getting rid of Nielsen was more to just pave the way for this season and let our roster kind of prove where they are at. If there is a move to be made, yes, we do need that number one scoring threat. Right now it's Jacob Vrana, which is great on paper, but we don't know how that's really going to play out in real life. So it's going to really come down to needing that number one scoring threat. And besides, an Eichel who is injured still and will likely need surgery,
right,
I don't really see many others on the market this year. So we're talking about maybe next year when it comes to Elias Pettersson, or there's a couple others. I think we're going to be talking about them later.
Foreshadowing.
Yes. And before we get deep into that, I'll cut it there. But
our producer may cut you off. He may cut your mic.
Yeah, hold on. What's that right here? But yeah, so I think kind of the way this move was shaped up was to let this season play out. Blashill, another thing we're going to talk about in a minute, has the pieces in place. We have all these young guys vying for this anchor of a spot on the lineup and really kind of making their place solidified. So I think this year is going to be the year that we ride it out. And with that, and with what Jeff's saying, being in the very tough Atlantic and also having to share our wild card spots with the even as tough Metro, I think we're going to be toward the bottom of the standings, more closer than to playoffs.
Yeah, it's a tough division. Kyle, you called it out before too, with both Stanley Cup finalists in
back-to-back years
like,
in our division.
Brutal, right? Not ideal for a rebuilding team that's going to be bringing in a lot of talented kids. And make no mistake about it, Billy 1991, this team is talented. They've got a lot of talent coming up, but they've barely played together. There's not a whole lot that's keeping that nucleus together right now. Jeff, you made a great point with the goaltending, and I completely agree with you. And the defense is going to be improved as well. But I don't think this is the year that they put it together. I do think this is the year where we start really being entertained with what we're seeing on the ice. Towards the end of last year, you could already feel it. You saw players like Zadina starting to step up, Rasmussen starting to step up towards the end of the season, and you just hope they can carry that over into this year. So absolutely. Really good comments there. I think you guys made some really good points, and Billy, we appreciate the comment and look forward to hearing from you again this week. So let's move on. Things kind of coming back full circle here. Kyle, you compared Namestnikov to Erne actually earlier in the show. Well, Hell 9001 actually came out and he praised the Erne contract, which we all agreed good for Erne. We'll see if it's good for the Wings or not, but certainly not a bad deal. Hal was excited about it, and I wanted to take a minute because we talked about the contract last week. We didn't talk too much about what Ernie's role was going to be, and actually, since we talked about Namestnikov earlier in this show, it works out quite well. So, Jeff, let's start with you. How do you think Adam Erne fits into this team this year? Do you expect the type of production that he put out last year?
I do. I've loved Adam Erne since his Tampa Bay days. The way he plays, he reminds me of a little bit less talented Yanni Gourde. He just fights for every puck, and he every inch of ice that he gets is because he earned it, not because it was given to him. And I absolutely love that about a player. I think that his numbers look great for a guy who was primarily depth. 11 goals in 45 games is nothing to slouch on. And in a larger sample size, that could easily be over 20. 82 game season, you never know what's going to happen. And now that we're getting back to that, I'm very excited. But yeah, honestly, I think he's a really underrated piece to this Red Wings team. He's not going to be your flashiest guy. He's not going to be your best guy in really any statistic, but he's going to help your team win. And that's what really matters is you're bringing up these young guys, and you have to have this sort of stability to make sure that you are winning some games. And you've got players that younger guys can rely on to, be there for them if they start to falter or if they have issues with their production. But yeah, no, I think that he can be a very solid middle six guy, kind of like you were mentioning, Pat, with Namestnikov. I think he could be that good middle six guy that provides kind of everything to a young lineup.
Sure. Yep. Makes sense. Kyle, you made the comparison earlier in the show, and you explicitly stated you would take Erne over Namestnikov. So how does Erne fit into this lineup, and what do you think he's going to do this year? What do you expect from him?
I also believe we have me on record saying last week that he was going to put up 15 to 20 goals and everyone only heard the 20 goals part of that. So thank you, Jeff, for at least agreeing that he could get there.
We round up on this show. So,
I think Erne is definitely going to be our middle six, probably our third line winger. He's going to be a grinder type player, like a Yanni Gourde type on that third line, going to fight for every puck. That's part of why I loved him. Jeff, that comparison is excellent. I think that's exactly the type of player he tries to be. And I think that's what Yzerman sees in him as well. And I think that's the type of role he is going to have on this team. He's going to be that third line guy. He'll be able to get plugged into the second line, maybe the second power play if need be. He's going to kill some penalties for us, but he's going to put the puck in the back of the net. I mean, the guy just has a ton of talent. And when you have the talent and you have that drive and you just don't give up on the play, good things are going to happen. So, I am expecting 15 to 20 goals this season.
30 goals? You think Ernie's going to 30 goals?
I hope it is.
Am I hearing 40? Am I hearing 40?
Just sign him up for the Heart right now. But yeah, I think he's going to end up being one of those role players that is kind of a Bertuzzi light, if you will, and someone that we could really, really, really take a lot of use out of and advantage on having on our third line.
Diet Bert. I like it. So I don't need to pile on to what you guys said because I agree with everything you said. I do think Erne could easily sneak up to the 15 goal mark
50?
easily this year. There you go. 1-5. But he's Kyle. What I really like about what you said is heart. Not only does he have the talent, but you can tell he's got the heart that backs it up. And my brother will laugh at me saying this, but heart is just something you can't defend. Yeah. Heart is just something you cannot defend against. And he shows that competitive drive and he shows the work ethic. And the results paid off last year. So here's hoping we see more of it. I completely agree with everything you guys said, so I don't need to pile on. We've got plenty of other things to talk about, but really good question, Hal. We appreciate the commentary and you watching and taking some time to comment. So good stuff. All right. Our next question is my favorite question of the week. And I already know for a fact that Devin is very upset. He's not here to discuss this, but I did not want to wait a week to discuss it. So we are going to put Devin on the hot seat next week and gather his thoughts on it. But in the meantime, Katz Kulo Jackson asked, is Steve Yzerman a better GM than he was a player? And just dropped the mic after asking that question because holy hell, is that a question of questions? And I'll give my thoughts, but because I'm the host, I'm not leading off this topic. Consider it hazing, new guy. But we're gonna go to you first.
I figured that would happen.
So, Jeff, your thoughts on is Steve Yzerman a better GM than player?
Yeah, that's a question right there. I'll tell you that. I've done my share of podcasts, but boy, I've never really been like starstruck by a question. That's pretty good one. Is he a better GM than he was a player? I mean, when I read that question, I was like, what? No, like that's not, no, never. I mean, like that's never gonna happen. He's a Hall of Famer. Like, but I mean, you start to think about it.
Yeah.
And, with the moves that he's made, if he kept up this kind of he got Alex Nedeljkovic for nothing. I mean, that's just as a starting point, you got a Calder Trophy finalist for nothing, for scraps.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, every GM makes a bad move here or there, and I wouldn't even call for me, the Nick Leddy trade was not something that I probably I think the value was a little off there, but I can understand why he did it at least.
Sure.
I know what the reasoning behind it, or I can speculate the reasoning behind it. I think if he kept this up for a lot of years and he brought, I think if he was here from this, I mean, where we are now in the middle of a rebuild to an eventual Stanley Cup championship, I think that you could make a case for it. I don't know if he's there yet because, I mean, he's still pretty young into his tenure with the Red Wings in the grand scheme of things. So I think if he had a little bit more experience, maybe a cup to his name as the GM and not as a player, I think that you could argue it
That's a big sticking point. That is a big sticking point for me, which I'll talk about in just a little bit as well. But before I go into my spiel, Kyle, you got a really interesting perspective from this too, because before you joined the Red Wings crew, you were covering the Lightning. So you even have a different perspective from the rest of us. So your thoughts, is Yzerman a better GM than player?
I mean, how can you love a question and hate a question so much? I mean, just like I saw this question on the YouTube comments last week, and I was like, wow, what a great question. I hope we don't touch this. And of course, that was like the immediate one we went off of. But, so this is how I broke it down. Yzerman's been a GM of an NHL team since the 2010-2011 season, so roughly 11 years. So I went back and I looked at his first 11 years as a player, and I'm going to compare him to his first 11 years as a GM, or as best I can. And holy cow, did I pick the wrong 11 years to look at. I want to throw this stat out there if people might not remember, but 1988, 1989, in 80 games, Yzerman scored 65 goals, had 90 assists, and had 155 points, and finished third in scoring. Behind Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky. He was also third in Hart voting, if you can believe that. But he won the
given the two names above him, I can, but that's besides the point.
But he did win the Lester B. Pearson Award, which was awarded by the media to the most impressive player in that season. So he was voted ahead of those two guys who were perennial Hart Trophy winners or finalists, perennial scoring leaders in those times. And after that season, he put up 127 points, 108 points, 103 points, and 137 points in the 4 years following, to round out pretty much that end of that decade I was looking at. But the Red Wings didn't even make a Stanley Cup final in those years. He made a Stanley Cup final within his first 5 years with the Tampa Bay Lightning, although they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks. So were those moves able to get deeper? So it's really hard to compare because he was on such a bad Red Wings team at the time. And now he's in charge of a bad Red Wings team, but not as bad as those teams. But I mean, man, was he a phenomenal player? And the good thing and the lucky thing for us Red Wings fans is he's not going to have a career-ending injury on the ice as a GM.
That's true.
Crossing my fingers still.
Sure hope not.
Yeah. And so if we get, this type of hockey IQ, and the other thing I almost forgot to mention is he adapted his play, not only once when Scotty Bowman took over, but when the whole league readapted in the early 2000s, he adapted his play and was still putting up points. So, I mean, he knows how to play. He knows how to adapt to the game. And as that is for a general manager, that is a great asset to have. And I think down the road, we're going to look back at him as one of the best, because he is still considered one of the best in the National Hockey League as a GM right now. Sure. So I think it's only going to solidify that. So I'm going to just kind of dance around that answer and pass it over to you.
I think, first of all, those are really good points. Second of all, and I touched on this last week, when the Red Wings improved and became a championship contender was when Yzerman stopped focusing on his offense and started becoming more of a two-way player, which Bowman challenged him to do.
Absolutely.
And he did it, and he adjusted as a player. And to me, that's the sign of the best leader you could possibly have. He wasn't out for individual accolades. The team. Mm-hmm. Kyle's favorite saying, right? The team. But, obviously, he's a heck of a GM, the architect of a Stanley Cup winner in Tampa Bay, even though he was not presiding over them. Good point. So there's no denying that. But to me, it's just too early to make this call.
Yes.
To me, he did not win those rings. And because he technically has no championships as a GM, I would say it's not a level playing field, because if you're going to say he's a better GM than player, then he's at least got to have a championship. And yes, I know he built those Tampa Bay teams. I get it, to the point where I inexplicably still cheer for the Lightning just because he was the one who basically put that team together. But I don't think I don't think that's an argument to be had at this point. It's an awesome question, and it's going to be fun to almost continually analyze this as things go on. Because if he takes the team that he inherited here in Detroit and turns them into a contender, not even a contender, a championship winner, I think there's a major argument to be had there. So,
yeah. And if we look, the timeline from when he was in Tampa and compare it to the timeline in Detroit, 5 years after taking over in Tampa Bay, they were in the Stanley Cup final. So if we're looking at 23, 24, it's 2 or 3 years away, we could potentially be in that hunt. I mean, it might take a few offseason signings. It might take, getting very hot on a young goaltender, but it could be there.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Really good answers to that question. Devin, I'm sure you're checking this episode out at some point. So best of luck. You're going to be on the hot seat next week, but looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it too. So, all right, let's move on because we still have 2 more questions to get to. The next question, and I'm actually going to preface this with, we have a commenter whose name is in a different language and I can't read it. So I did some Google translation because I'm sick of saying another commenter and wanted to address you by name. If your name is wrong, please correct me in the comments this week so I can get it right. But from what I deduced, this question comes from Ishmael. And Ishmael, we really appreciate you watching and commenting. Thank you. And you brought up what in any other week probably would have been my favorite question, to be honest. And spoiler alert, our producer, Matthew, who I'm sure has an ear tuned right now, covers the Canucks as well. So he may have some feelings on this. So if this entire segment gets edited out, in fact,
I hear a random voice. That's us.
So without further ado, Ishmael asked about potentially making Elias Pettersson an offer sheet. Right. And for those watching who may not know what that is, really quick, for your restricted free agents that aren't currently under contract, a different team can swoop in and make an offer. And if they do that, the team that currently owns his rights, in this case, Vancouver, has the opportunity to match that contract or let him go for compensation for draft picks. Very rarely do these things actually go through. Just doing a little bit of research here. The last time it actually went through was 2007 with, wait for this name, Dustin Penner. When Edmonton took Dustin Penner on an offer sheet and Anaheim got 3 picks as compensation for Penner. The last time anybody made an offer sheet was Montreal did to Sebastian Aho in 2019. I don't know if they drove the price or not, but Carolina paid dearly for that because they did match. But the last time we actually saw one go through just to set the stage was 2007. So this is not common for them to actually take place, but they do happen. So with that in mind, should Yzerman entertain giving Elias Pettersson an offer sheet? Jeff, your thoughts?
So I'm from Nashville and I write about the Predators, and everybody knows about the massive offer sheet that Shea Weber got. And with his whole injury this year, I wish him the best recoveries. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the cap recapture and all that stuff. But that's another discussion just on the offer sheet topic. For me, I absolutely adore Elias Pettersson. I'm a big analytics guy, and he's great by all the analytics, and he's pretty much what I like to call an analytics darling. He's, I mean, he's pretty much, he's at the top of almost any like possession metric or just wins above replacement metric that you can find. He's just everywhere. And it's mainly because of his great two-way play. He's not going to like destroy you with a bunch of points, but he will beat you in your own end and beat you in his end. His stick play is excellent. His stick lifts are great. He plays the puck really well. He's just a very smart player. And I think he would be awesome for the Red Wings to get if they wanted to try and pursue him. I mean, they've got enough cap space. He's going to be paid a fair amount, whether it's from the Canucks or from somebody else. It's just a matter of, who's willing to give up the draft picks if they're going to try and offer sheet him. Yeah. And I think the Red Wings could afford to do that. But it's all a question of which way Steve Yzerman wants to go. And if he wants to keep those draft picks and kind of bet on the Red Wings and bet on his scouting department, which he clearly likes to do, then I don't see him doing it. But as a watcher of the Red Wings, as a writer of the Red Wings, as a fan of the NHL and offer sheets and just general chaos, I think I'd love to see them at least off or entertain the idea of offer sheeting him or just doing it. That'd be great. I'd love it.
I love it. Jeff, I can't. Who offered Weber? This was when he was in Nashville, right? Who offered Weber? I can't remember.
The Philadelphia Flyers.
It was the Flyers that offered Weber. Oh, then and we all know kind of how that turned out. But yeah, but good stuff. That was a good reference there. I like it. Kyle, over to you. Elias Pettersson, offer sheet.
Yeah, Jeff brings up a lot of great points. I think it's really going to come down to where this team is after this season. If we're sitting somewhere near the bottom of the standings with lotto aspirations, and it's going to be much of the same the following year, whether they're bringing in a replacement for Blashill or not, if that's because that could cause a whole changeover with, having another year into the rebuild. I think we keep the draft picks. If we're still hanging around the lotto opportunities, you got to keep your first, second round picks there and really try and hit with those prospects, especially if there's going to be a generational talent or two in the 2023 draft.
Sure.
If we are only at the point where we are one or two key pieces away, and an Elias Pettersson type player, which is the type of player we're trying to instill in our system, in Blashill's system right now, then I think definitely you have to go after that type of player. Jeff brought up a great point. He's not going to kill you in points, but he's going to kill you in the defensive responsibility. And we're the type of team, the Red Wings are the type of team that are really built from the defense out. So if your forwards are coming back and helping out in the defense, it helps get the puck out a lot quicker. And then if you can have the puck in your possession or in the other team's end most of the game, then you're going to end up getting those goals, or the games you're going to win by are going to be, 2-1, 3-2 instead of 5-4, 6-5. Yep. So in that sense, if he's the type of player that we are missing and that we can tell grabbing him is going to really plug us and put us into that next tier, then I say absolutely, we definitely need to do it. I'm not sure he is that type of guy quite yet. It's going to depend on where we end up falling in our third and fourth line. Larkin's kind of being molded into more of that player. Barkov's going to be available, who's also that type of player. And we talked about, if we go after Barkov, do we need a Larkin? It's kind of the same with Pettersson. I think you need more of a natural goal scorer in that role. But in the sense that, do you pass up a player like Pettersson that's just sitting there? No, you absolutely do not.
Yep. Well, my thoughts on the matter, a couple of things. One, I don't think the Red Wings are going to be bad enough to be eyeing a spot in the lottery. And that's just how I feel. I think they're going to be almost painfully mediocre, which will be an improvement on what we've seen. They'll be in every game, as I talked about last week. I think those 1-goal games that are going to be the big difference maker, we're going to see a lot of them this year. But I think they're going to be painfully mediocre. So we're going to hover in this purgatory where they're not quite going to be a lottery type team. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I don't think the Red Wings, even though it's tough when you see generational talents come into the draft, I don't think the Red Wings are going to be in a position to be drafting that unless they trade up moving forward. So given that, I would say, why not? I don't think you're dependent on any of your future draft picks, of which they still have quite a few. I don't think you're going to be dependent on any of those to build out your team. The rebuild is well underway. The talent has been drafted and is developing wherever that may be. Grand Rapids, Sweden, anywhere in between. So you have the cap space, Jeff, like you said. Yeah. You have the draft picks, Kyle, like you said. Why not take a shot? Again, being a realist, even if you made him offer sheet, Vancouver's probably not letting him go. You just have to think they're going to match, unless it's just absolutely ludicrous. And Matthew, we should have him on because he may have some thoughts on that as well. But I have to think, even if you make him an offer sheet, Vancouver is going to match. So the likelihood, even if an offer is made, in my opinion, is very, very small that they would actually end up with him. But what the hell? Why not? Might be worth a try. Depends on where things land, like everybody said, how the season goes, but it'll be interesting to see, and it's a fun point to talk about. So Ishmael, really good question. Appreciate the perspective. Keep me honest on your name, please. And Kyle, looks like you have something to say.
One question for you though. If it came down to Pettersson or Barkov, who are you offering it to first?
Yeah, I'd probably go Barkov on that one.
Yeah.
Jeff, what same?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Alexander Barkov's just like they play the same type of game. So I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong, but I feel like Barkov kind of has that more offensive kind of game that you want.
Yeah, I feel like he's got a little more of the size and grit to him too. Like he's going to play more of a nastier game if you need him to versus Pettersson. But I mean, I honestly, both players would be very welcomed on the wings. So I don't want to sit here and pit Knicks.
Well, there's a reason they're both in the conversation. Right. There's a reason they're both in the conversation for sure.
In the end, I'm on Team Chaos, and that's really that's what matters to me.
Team
wild card.
Yeah.
There we go. I like it. Good stuff. Good perspective. We'll see how that one shakes out, but really good question. I like it. All right, we've got one more, and I have a feeling this is not going to be the last time we talk about this as the season presses on, but Lord Venom, aka friend of the show Rick Korth, commented, and here we are again, finding ourselves talking about Jeff Blashill, and what he's facing heading in. What do the Wings need to do this year to get him out of the hot seat? Because his seat is clearly scorching hot, has been for a while. Recapping, he's 172 and 221-ish. I don't know why I don't have any overtime losses, but 172 and 221-ish in Detroit. One playoff appearance, have missed for 5 straight seasons. But on the flip side of that, I mean, come on. He hasn't had much to work with lately either, so you don't want to be too hard on him. But where is that happy medium? What does this team need to do to get him at least out of the hot seat discussion? Jeff, you got the first word.
So I think for me, I mean, like you said, I think when you're in a rebuild, the coach doesn't really get the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it is really hard to coach when a team is pretty much at its worst, especially with a team that's as storied as like a franchise that's as storied as the Red Wings. I mean, fans, they want success. And when you see teams win cups over and over again, and you see players like Pavel Datsyuk, and you see Henrik Zetterberg and Lidstrom, and I mean, I could go on and on. It's hard to see your team in the doldrums of the NHL standings, and a coach like Jeff Blashill is not going to be a fan favorite, and that's just kind of how it works. I think an interesting thing that you brought up, Pat, was painful mediocrity. And I think that's kind of the stage that you need to be at if you're Jeff Blashill and you want to stay as the coach of the Red Wings. Nobody wants to be mediocre. As I said, I'm a Predators writer, and the Predators have been pretty mediocre for the last couple seasons, and it is awful. But I think the difference between the two franchises is one is just coming off of a Stanley Cup appearance and 2 Central Division wins and yada, yada, yada. And the Red Wings have been in a rebuild, and they're only trending upwards. And trending upwards means being mediocre for some of the time. And so I think you need to find that medium of your players are developing well. And if Seider comes in this season, which I think he should, you need to see some play that he can be that number 1 or number 2 defenseman. And then you need to see that the team in the standings improves. I mean, that's what everybody cares about at the end of the day. If you're sitting in the bottom of the standings, no one cares. You're gone. I mean, you need to, like, especially in the Atlantic Division, like we mentioned, it's extremely hard to win in this division. So if they can move up even like 2 spots in the division, not make the playoffs, not even contend for the playoffs, but like move up a little bit, just be one of the better bad teams is what I would call
better bad teams.
Yeah, that's probably what I'd like to see, and that's probably what I think would keep Jeff Blashill for a season or 2, and just kind of move him on up from there.
I think really good points, Kyle. To you, and I know in the past you've said, barring any sort of crazy losing streak, Yzerman probably sticks with Blashill all season. But what's it going to take for him to be out of the hot seat where we're not even talking about his job security?
Yeah, I think, Jeff definitely hit all the points on the head. We got to be mediocre. We got to have that, we had the period where we were bad. Now we got to have the period where we're mediocre, and then we get to the period where we're good and then great again. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think being in that purgatory is going to show that we're moving out of the lotto conversations, which means we're winning more games. We're in more games. We're probably taking more to overtime or shootout. We need to see less of those 7-2 beatings where we just look like the team didn't even get off the bus.
Yes.
You need a lot less of those. You need to show a little more creativity in the offensive end, I think, for the Blashill era to continue. And by that, I mean, just allowing some of those top line guys to go out there and play their game. I know he really wants to be focused in the defensive zone, and that's great. But if he wants to get off that hot seat and show that he can make the next steps to take this team to that next level, he needs to show that he can give the leash when it needs to be given, and he can pull them back in when he needs to and has to control them. And I think that's going to be huge this season to show that we're in that mediocrity, but in the sense that we're there because we're a better team than we were last year, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. And, for my part, I know we've got Alex Tangay now to basically run the power play, but the criteria for me, I swear to God, if I see Larkin wind up and try to carry in on the power play one more time, that's what costs him his job. No, I'm kidding. But like, to your point, Kyle, more creativity in the offensive zone, whether it's even strength, whether it's special teams. Mm-hmm. And for me, I want to see more offense. I want to see more goals scored. Frankly, I don't even care about their position in the standings this year because you don't know what you're going to get after the season we had last year. Things are now back into the divisions that they'd previously realigned to. And I don't really care where they end up in the standings because I don't think this team is going to make the playoffs. But what I do care about is seeing them score more goals. I do care about, Kyle, you said, let's get rid of those 7-2 games. Everybody has them once or twice in the year, but I don't want to see this happening once a month.
Yeah.
To the Red Wings' credit, 2 years ago when that happened, sometimes it was back-to-back 7-2, 7-2. Last year when they gave up a huge goose egg, they'd come back and win almost every time.
Yeah.
So you saw that resolve starting to peek through a little bit, and that's what you need to keep seeing for Blashill, in my opinion, to keep his job, because you want to see them scoring more goals. They were still near the bottom. The defense is much improved, so they should be giving up fewer goals as well. And we'll see what happens. But Kyle, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I thought you said a week or two ago that you expected Blashill probably to make it through the season. And I agree with you again, unless they go through an 8-game win, a losing streak, a 9-game losing streak, a 10-game losing streak. They start the season 0-10. You might have to make a change.
I was going to say it's going to have to be a double-digit losing streak, and we're talking like 5-1 games where the guys just look like they have no clue what's going on in their systems. But I don't see that happening. We did improve a little bit from last year. We're going to struggle a bit this year. But yeah, it's definitely going to be very similar to last year. I think you're right, though. I think we're going to have a little fewer goals given up and a little more goals scored for. I would still like to see us finish above Ottawa and Buffalo, but that's just kind of my personal, I would like to stay above them in the measuring stick. Sure. But I agree. If we can see, more goals, more open games where we're scoring, even if we don't close them out in the end, but just showing that we're there and we can, play those run and gun games, and not to keep taking up more time on this. But if you look at the way that the Lightning won the last 2 cups, they could change their game to their opponent. They could do a run and gun game, with the teams that were quicker and more offensive. They could do a
11-7.
Yeah, they could do a heavyweight battle with the Islanders where they just sit there and trade punches to the face all day. I mean, you have to be able to play those different styles of game. And right now the Red Wings cannot do that.
The versatility is such a good point, Kyle. And can you get your guys to that level? And as for the standings comment, I think to the point we've all been making, if you're scoring more goals and you're giving up fewer, chances are you're going to be higher than Ottawa and Buffalo.
Yes, very true.
I'd like to add that I think you mentioned like resiliency and how that kind of shone through last year and after big losses. And I think that's the one thing is that you hear when a lot of coaches are fired is they lost the room.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing is not only are you kind of moving up in the standings as much as you possibly can, you're scoring more goals, but you're also clearly listening to the coach. Like there are some things that you can see on the ice that show like the coach is getting his message through. And along with, I mean, you can look at all the statistics you want, but if the coach isn't getting his message through, then it doesn't really matter in the end. And so that's probably one of the bigger things that I'd focus on as well.
I think great points.
Yeah.
What I want to say, just to kind of, it'll wrap up the show actually. But where Blashill doesn't get enough credit, I think, and we often overlook, is the fact that when he came in as coach, and we didn't even realize this at the time, but think about what was happening behind the bench with Babcock.
Yeah.
And he was almost destroying the culture in the locker room. And I don't mean to throw him under the bus because I was his biggest advocate. I was really upset when he chose to go to Toronto over staying in Detroit. But as things have come out and, players have said, and obviously everything with Johan Franzen and everything
100%.
else, it's disturbing. And Blashill came in, followed that, and you wouldn't have even known that stuff was going on under Babcock because of how Blashill came in and united the team. So
he's like the third longest tenured coach in the NHL right now,
which
or something.
Is mind blowing.
Yeah, like to think of that. And through a whole rebuild, like it's like what? But
exactly.
There's trust there.
There's absolute trust there. I think he's great for the locker room, which when you're rebuilding and you have these young kids with very delicate psyche, he's a great person to have in there. And I think we're going to see the Wings make strides under him. Personally, I hope we do, because I like the guy as a person. I think he goes about his business the right way, and I think he's a great coach, but that just hasn't shown yet. So let me hear it in the comments. I'm all for it. And I'm not even making a prediction one way or another. I'm just saying I'd like to see him succeed, because as Blashill goes this year, so will the Red Wings.
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of how it goes. So in any case, great show, guys. Jeff, welcome to the chaos, Jeff.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
We love having you in here.
Happy to be here.
We certainly want to thank you guys for watching. Give us a like, subscribe, make sure you comment. We'll engage back and forth with you like we do every week. We want to hear from you. Tweet us at THW Grindline, and we'll answer your comment on air in our very next show. Thank you, and we will see you next time.